Hi, I'm Kevin Klein from the Winnipeg Sun. Today, we have a special guest joining us who is involved in the development, I guess you would call it development industry here in Winnipeg and in other places in Manitoba, who is also a former employee of the city of Winnipeg who worked inside the planning and development department. This is John Wintrup. Thank you for joining us, John.
Thank you. Great to be here today.
There's two reasons why I wanted you to be on this little program today. The first one is that today, November 22nd, anyways, is the National Housing Day in Canada. A day, I guess, we celebrate national housing. The other reason is that a few days ago, I sent you a copy of an email that the Minister of Housing for the federal government had sent to me and the Winnipeg Sun, telling us how great and how beneficial the accelerated housing accelerator fund has been for Winnipeg. Now, this is because I've written more than one article now about the fact that the housing accelerator fund is not working. We, of course, included comments from the Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre, who specifically mentions the problems in Winnipeg and how the accelerator fund is not working in Winnipeg. And at the same time, we keep challenging the mayor's office, who continues to give us spin replies about the 8,800 and now 12,000 new residences coming to Winnipeg because of this program. So I gave you a copy of that email, which identified several properties that the minister's office is saying are only because of the Housing Accelerator Fund. What did you find out?
Well, first, I'd like to say I'm a big housing advocate and I'm a professional planner. I want to see housing. I want to see it now. I want to see it being constructed. I've been advocating that for more than a decade now, inside City Hall, outside of City Hall, all over the place. I drove around and looked at all those sites yesterday, and I see little to no activity actually happening on any of these parking lots or vacant fields for housing. I see the private sector building housing out there, receiving no government funding. They're doing it, but the sites that I select few, very limited, that were provided some money, I don't see any activity actually happening on those sites.
Now, what do you think? I mean, they're touting all of this money, and I mean, I know it's politicians playing a game, and they're trying to spin it, they're trying to polish it up, they're putting lipstick on a pig, if you will, and saying that we have all of these permits now. Mayor Gillingham, it was a challenge. We challenged him on that and said I thought it was a goal. No, I never said it was a goal. It was just a hope. But now he continues to come out with that. If it really was an issue, then John, why are we sitting here with developments like Fulton Grove, which we know as Parker Lands, which has been waiting to be built for, I don't know, 11 years? Uh,
Well, Andrew, I've
12.
been on that project. Andrew retained me on that project 12 years ago. We just celebrated our 12th anniversary on that. Um, Still not going anywhere. He wanted to start this fall and have some houses starting by spring of next year, and that's not happening again.
And how
So
many units would be on that property alone?
I'll ballpark it more, not only units. So we're looking at just an average of two people per unit. You're looking at 4,000 people could have been living in a place to live by now if it had been approved when the judge said it should have been approved. And then by now he would have paid, I believe, over $30 million in taxes. So that's a lost opportunity in taxes, and that's a lost opportunity for people not having houses. And these are houses that are going to include like yards, front yards, rear yards, front driveways, back lanes, a diversity of housing, not just a multiple family high structure. I love those too, but I also like people to have a place with a yard. That market needs to be satisfied as well. That this could have been satisfied, this product alone. We're talking about, I'd say, roughly 2,000 dwelling units.
But this isn't the only one, right? I mean, we've heard about the project that you're also a part of at LeMay Forest. We've heard about, I mean, we all know about the Polo Park development that was brought forward a long time ago that Gillingham voted against because he needed more studies. We needed more studies. We need this. We need that. There are a number of projects that I think we could identify that if the city really wanted to see more housing, would have been approved years ago.
Yeah, in the last 11 and a half months, just working out of here in my living room, I put forward 5,202 dwelling units. And I probably will, by the end of this month, crack over 5,500 that need a discretionary approval. I don't need any changes to regulations. I just need to have these processed. If they were just processed, all private sector funding, that would have all started construction by now or early next year and have housing, people moving into housing in the fall of 2026. That's our goal. September 2026, people moving into housing when you're on a timeline for construction. That's not happening. So a lot of my projects are just sitting at the city of Winnipeg. I've got one I submitted March 28th. It still hasn't been processed. We're now into March 28th. I'm in November. I thought I was going to be at a public hearing in the end of June. It's along a corridor, actually. I need a simple rezoning application. I'm opening a public lane. It's going to provide just 12 units. And here I am at the end of November. Other applications I've submitted in June, I just need the plans approved, just the design, the external design approved. We submitted at the end of June thinking we'd be rolling into building permits this fall. That's not happening. We still haven't received our approval on it. They haven't even accepted the application yet. So it takes 220 days now to get some discretionary approvals submitted. A decade ago, that was down to 99 days. It's now up to 220 days or more and increasing.
So what are they telling you the problem is? I mean, they've got more staff. We heard in the last election, oh, we're going to put more staff and more bodies. Every department's going to become a housing department. That's going to be our focus. We're going to get things through. But here we are. It's the same old, same old, same old. So what are they
I don't
telling you
know.
the problem is?
Well, I find it's more if they're increasing staff, it's behind the scenes. I don't believe there's any more frontline staff, and I think it's a deployment of how you're using staff. I always look at the flood of '97 that I lived through and many other people lived through. If you just had a whole bunch of people in the back room talking about building sandbag dikes and not enough people actually on the front line building sandbag dikes, we wouldn't have survived. So through my experience, everybody suddenly became a sandbag dike, builder, throwing sandbags and protecting the homes and family. Rules such as the spring weight restriction on roads were suddenly, we're going to dismiss this. This is a crisis. Let's, ignore this rule for the time being and have heavy trucks deliver sandbags to the houses. And suddenly everybody was throwing sandbags. But if everybody is just in the back room talking to themselves and there's nobody out on the front line, we're not moving any forward with the housing.
See, here's my problem with this. As somebody who sat on council and I've seen how things have worked, and it was always my problem when I was there. The money that they claim they get from the federal government, like they want to get over $100 million, why they seem to change their focus. So it changes to say, okay, now we've got to meet all these requirements to get that money, is because the city of Winnipeg actually takes a commission, if you will, from those funds. 100% of that money coming from the federal government is not going to housing. Absolutely not. It's going to the city to pay for their meetings, to pay for, staff to review applications and to pay for this and to pay for that. So a chunk of that money is not being used for housing. Do you think that could be what's delaying it, is that they see this carrot and they see a way of putting some more money in their pocket, not necessarily to help people, but money in their pocket. So they've kind of gotten off all the private sector ones that are ready to go and shift their focus to this?
What I see is just more regulation that does perpetuate more meetings, more staff to process, the regulations that are creating. So I'll give an example. Variances is non-discretionary approval, meaning a city staff person and sometimes the committee has to approve it. Winnipeg does over 1,000 variances a year. I personally do more variances in the state of California. San Francisco, New York, they measure the number of variances in like less than 100. Winnipeg is doing 1,000 variances. You can't do something here, whether you're building a garage or a deck or a house or a multiple family, without coming forward and getting a variance, a discretionary approval, meaning staff, meaning meetings, etc., review, analysis. Again, those are thousands that Winnipeg has to do every year if you're doing something. In the city of Vancouver, where they're building a lot of housing, they do about 100 a year. City of New York does 50 a year. There was a report that came out about 2 years ago out of Pepperdine Law Review looking at variances, and it was called, I believe, variances, Canary in a Coal Mine, that looked at the number of variances that cities do across North America. Winnipeg is exceedingly high compared to like major American cities. Again, I personally do more variances than some major cities in the States. I get phone calls from colleagues down California because I'm the variance guy. I do more than their entire department does. So that is okay. Now you have all these regulations that now you have to change them to be able to move something forward. So then you need to have more staff. You need to have more meetings. We need to have more public hearings. We need more resources dedicated to say, yes, we're going to change this rule here, so we can allow some housing.
So I'm going to ask you this because we asked the mayor's office to comment on Fulton Grove, Parker Lands, and the delays that are happening there. And we basically got a response back from the spin doctors that everything there is moving along, but they're not aware of any problems and that things are going as anticipated and very well. You are involved. Is that the case? Is what we're hearing from politicians accurate?
Um, well, I talk almost constantly with Andrew Marquez. I know he still doesn't have his development agreement, which is the final kind of document he needed. If he had received it anytime this fall, he would have been out on site servicing it and starting house construction. He didn't get it. So we still don't have it. So now we're in November. We're hitting winter time. We can't start site servicing when the ground's frozen. So again, that's delayed. LeMay Forest, the city, actually, we went to a hearing on that matter, and they admitted that it was their reason why they delayed it for 2 months for processing the application. It was their fault, not ours. They needed to provide themselves a document, internal document, to allow the application to just get processed. And it took them over 60 days before they gave us this one letter to allow us to process the application for themselves to process the application. So they create these rules internally, as well as the regulations that somehow, I think Jon Stewart encapsulated it perfectly on the Daily Show on Monday of this week when he's talking about the Democratic Party. You created this type of bureaucracy in government, all these rules, and you just can't seem to thread that needle. There's always a reason why this thread just can't get through that needle. We're not actually building housing. We're creating more regulations. We're creating more internal rules. We're creating more processes. And at some point, it's just not putting any housing product on the ground.
So based on your experience, because I was looking at some numbers, the housing numbers across Canada, we're behind where we've been. So all this talk of how many houses we're building and affordable housing, first of all, affordable housing, I wish that I could talk to every single person who lives in Winnipeg and ask them not to buy that when you hear politicians talking about it, because the affordability housing matrix here is not affordable housing that they're talking about, is that you and I would be thinking that they're talking about. But if you look at it, other cities are well above housing starts where they were multifamily dwellings and such. Halifax, Edmonton, these places are all over, and we're under. So that tells me this is, as I would say, Pierre Poilievre said, this is really a Winnipeg problem.
Yeah, the other concerning number I come from CMHC was last week they released a study looking at mortgage errors, people who are defaulting on their mortgage. And they had three classifications. Most cities in Canada are stable. Winnipeg is in a class all by itself where they're really concerned about people defaulting on their mortgages next year. Mortgage errors are a real thing because they're seeing people in Winnipeg defaulting on other non-mortgage loans and financing. So there's going to be under pressure next year on mortgage errors that CMHC is predicting for. It's stable for now, but they are flagging it for something to watch next year. Right now, I think a lot of people are holding on to what they have, and a lot of people are going to have to renegotiate their mortgages next year. I'm one of them. I'm going to be paying at a higher interest rate. I think a lot of people are going to be hurting next year. And I'm really concerned now, not only the lack of housing supply and product getting out there to keep prices low, but I'm starting to get really concerned about people who are going to be scraping together, try to make their mortgage payments. They're already defaulting on other things. One of the indicators I watch here locally is the number of vehicles that are getting repossessed. So I talked to the towing companies. How many vehicles are you guys kind of repossessing? Boy, this past winter, in February, they were clawing back a lot of vehicles from people because if you're between paying your car or paying your mortgage, well, I'm going to default on my car and pay my mortgage. A lot of people can make their car payments. So now that's being stripped away. I'm starting to get concerned about people being able to make their mortgage payments next year. There's a lack of housing supply. There's not a lot of product. Again, a Fulton Grove, should have been under construction now to have some product out there next spring. That's not happening. And it's not just high-rise buildings. Like we need all types of housing. Not everybody wants to live in a high-rise. A lot of people want a yard and a place to go in a leafy community with parks nearby and a school nearby. They don't want to live in a high-rise building in downtown Winnipeg. And I'm not seeing a lot of product out there for in the suburbs of like new housing on a lot with a yard that people are really desiring out there.
So, and this every month that goes by, because you're talking about affordability, and I know we had to renegotiate our mortgage right as the rates jumped up to the highest. Luckily for some, the rates have been coming down, and it hurt. It really hurt. We had to make our own decisions, right? Well, we got to cut back on this, cut back on that. Um, but as the city delays projects like Parker Lands, like the Polo Park, like LeMay Forest, or the many that you already have in the department waiting for approval, that impacts all of the people that need housing because the price, I would believe, goes up, correct?
Yeah, house prices have gone up over the last like 10 years, last 15 years. I believe over 110, 130% in terms of house pricing. I'll give an example. About 8 years ago, I did a lot. I do many infill housing, these lot splits. You take a 50-foot wide lot split into 225. And about 8 years ago, those houses would be, my client would come in, do that, and the house would sell around 250, 260. Now those houses are selling for over $500,000. Like the price has gone up so substantially for some of these infill housing lots that it's now just it's pricing people out of the market. I'm one of those people. I love Osborne Village, but I'd like to have a nice house with a yard. I can't find housing in Winnipeg. I have a friend of mine who's a professional. He's born and raised in Winnipeg like me, went to school, university, blue collar background to become a professional engineer. He can't find housing in Winnipeg. So these are people, myself, other people, I know of them. They're just looking for a small house with a yard, nothing huge or in a nice neighborhood. And they can't find it. It's outside their reach and ability right now because of the not only interest rates, but the product out there is so the price of it is just outside their price point. And so a lot of people are starting to vote with their feet where they're like, I'm going to try and stay here as long as I can. But next June, if there's no housing product here that's within my price range of the qualified mortgage I can get, I have to look at a different jurisdiction to live in.
Yeah, I believe that. I've talked to a lot of people that are already starting to look elsewhere, look in other provinces, look out far out into the RMs as well. Finally, though, I want to, because we spent some time on this, can I ask you, somebody who's been involved in this, you're a professional, you've been involved in it for a long time, you talk to people from across the country, and obviously you talk to people throughout North America about development. What would you do right now to fix the housing crisis in Winnipeg?
Oh, that's a tough one because I think some of the steps I've been advocating for going back 6 or 7 years was to avoid a crisis, was to include housing to get it going. I think right now is I'd like to see more frontline staff, less backroom kind of discussions. I think there should be a lot more frontline staff processing. I think there should be a deregulation, not increasing the number of regulations, increasing the red tape, but actually deregulation, allowing more items to go forward. Again, Winnipeg does about 1,000 variances a year. Some of the products that they've come forward with in terms of where they're saying we're changing our regulations, you've actually added more. You've taken one away and added three. So now I have even more regulations. Out of the 5,200 dwelling units, they've made a change in July to their regulatory framework, the zoning bylaw, and they're talking about changing this week the malls and corridors. Out of all my projects, I think 2 dwelling units were affected by increasing the timeline. That's it. The other 5,200 are still need regulations. I'd like to see it deregulated more so that you have more as of right housing. That's what a lot of states are doing. Massachusetts, California, you're seeing it in Calgary, Edmonton. Edmonton, the quickest thing they did was eliminate their parking requirements. Minneapolis has really eliminated their parking requirements. Saskatoon, Regina, Calgary, they're all either eliminating or reducing or drastically reducing. We haven't. Winnipeg still has some of the highest parking requirements in North America. The only other major Canadian city that matches us is the city of Vaughan. We have like at least rapid transit. So that one quick change your bylaw and say, okay, no longer parking requirement. It's 1.5, 1.2 some areas. They're talking about lowering it to 0.5 in certain select areas. How about eliminating it altogether and let the market decide what we need for parking? Now, that's a very quick fix that a lot of municipalities did right away a couple of years ago when they said we're in the starting of a housing crisis. We're going to eliminate this one regulation. So deregulation. I think we need to actually deregulate it. And I write regulations. I interpret regulations. I like a robust policy framework. We need to deregulate some of our rules here in Winnipeg.
It's a point well taken, and I think also to Pierre Poilievre's point, we need to end the Housing Accelerator Fund. It really isn't working. There's no evidence whatsoever that I could find that I could point someone to say, here it's working, it's doing very well. The cost of housing, as you alluded to and discussed quite rightfully, is housing prices are going up. In new houses, they have GST, they have this, they have that. And I think we need to look at leadership, even in the province. We need to cut some taxes back off. If housing is a crisis, and it is, politicians have to stop calling it a crisis and deal with it as a crisis. They need to take immediate action, like you said. When the flood came, everyone had to fill sandbags, all hands on deck. Well, if this is a crisis, and it is, politicians have to start treating it like a crisis as well. Eliminate all the taxes on new houses. Like let's get this let's get our housing market going. John, I appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll talk some more about this because I like to keep in touch with you to see what's happening at Winnipeg City Hall with developments. And I hope for all of us that these changes get made.
We need housing. This is a crisis. This is the 97 flood. The waters are coming up to our necks. We need housing on the ground now. If something's not working, we need to start changing right now to make it work. Housing is a human right. Winnipeggers need housing. We need all types of housing. Start making adjustments, start changing the game plan. Let's get some housing and people in housing now.
Yeah, stop talking about it as a crisis and start dealing with it as a crisis.
Exactly.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.